With every major patch, the 14 team gives us more and more reasons to play PvP, and with the recent addition of special weapon effects, they may have breathed a bit of life back into ranked. But if you plan on going for these weapon effects, playing ranked isn't going to be enough. You're going to have to win. So here are 6 key things you should do to help improve your chances of winning and climbing the ranks. Now you may be saying to yourself, play the objective, aren't you kind of stating the obvious? Yes, I am. Because, you see, there is one universal truth in any objective-based team game, and that is the fact that no one wants to play the objective. And unlike Frontline, where you can murder hobo your way to a victory, in Crystalline that's usually not the case. The further you let the enemy get the crystal, the harder it is for you to win, and vice versa. Your team could have triple the kills of the enemy, but if your team just completely ignores the crystal and the enemy even moves at 0.1%, then they'll win. But the most important reason you don't want to forget to push the crystal, other than winning of course, is that you don't want to be the team stuck on push duty during overtime. Pushing the crystal into the enemy already isn't an easy task, and when you add to that the restriction of not being able to leave the crystal, it only gets harder. And while you definitely can push the crystal all the way from your base to theirs during overtime, it's an uphill battle. The further you get, the easier it is for the enemy to get back, while the distance between your team and the crystal only grows, meaning every mistake by the enemy becomes less punishing, while for your team it becomes more so. Add to this the fact the enemy isn't restricted by the crystal, meaning they can retreat and heal while you're stuck to the crystal, because if you're off of it for more than a few seconds, you'll lose. All of this is to say that if your team isn't going to move the crystal, then you need to be the one to do so. After all, you only need one person to push. One of the most common pieces of advice you'll receive when playing something that allows you to pick between different characters, classes, kits, or jobs is to find the one that best fits you and master it. And the reasoning for this is pretty simple. By focusing on only 1 or 2 jobs, you'll become more proficient with them much faster, which in return will allow you to give more attention to learning the fundamentals of the game mode, increasing your overall ability a lot quicker than if you were constantly trying to learn all the different jobs to a proficient level. And another reason that mastering a single job is so important is because the smaller team size of Crystalline means that your performance has much more an effect on whether your team wins or loses. And possibly the best way to see this is with mirror matches. Say we have 2 teams with relatively similar skill levels and both teams have a white mage. Well, that scale will likely tilt in favor of whichever white mage has more experience with the job, because that white mage is more likely to make better use of their kit than the opposing mage, meaning they'll have a greater impact on fights, making it easier for their team to win. So having a job you're both comfortable and skilled with goes a long way with helping you win your games. Mastering a single job is going to be your top priority, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't learn how the other jobs work, as having a general idea of how each job plays will help you predict what the enemy is going to do, and the thing is that you don't actually have to play the jobs to learn how they work. It does help, but it's much more important to pay attention to how people are playing the different jobs in your games. Try to learn something from every match and take notes of any repeat patterns you notice from specific jobs, and when you play against those same jobs again, try to use those behaviors you observed to your advantage. Let's use Monk and Ninja as examples. Both jobs heavily focus on single target damage and generally want to go for 1v1 fights. Because of this, they have a tendency to begin games by trying to flank behind their enemy to focus the squishier jobs. And if you're caught off guard by this, you'll likely end up dying. However, if you see the enemy team has a Monk or a Ninja, then you can predict that they might try to flank your team, in which case you can either be more prepared to defend yourself, or you can warn your team and possibly punish the flank. Another good example of why knowing how a job works is so important is Warrior. When the PvP changes first happened, everyone saw Warrior as completely overpowered on the same level as White Mage, and they couldn't understand how Primal Rend could exist as a normal ability. But as people began to understand the new PvP, they started to realize that stacking together is a really bad idea because most jobs can heavily punish this, like Warrior. So players started to spread out more, making it much more difficult for warriors to land those 5 people rends, and instead, they would just jump into the enemy and die. Warrior literally went from being overpowered to okay just because the player base developed a better understanding of not only the job, but the game as well. And now for the topic you've all been waiting for, as everyone has a bit of bloodlust within them: fighting. There are 4 major things that you really need to keep track of during each of your fights, those being your resources, your team, your enemy's resources, and lastly, the crystal. Please, for the love of God, don't forget the crystal. Now, the reason these 4 things are important should be rather obvious. Keeping an eye on your resources like your health and mana ensures that you won't die and lets you know when you should retreat. And that's something you need to keep in mind. Don't be afraid to retreat to restore your health and mana. You'll do your team more good on a full tank than if you're running on fumes. Speaking of your team, don't just ignore them. Pay attention. If someone is trying to pick off your backliners, then turn and help them. It's generally going to be easier to pick off an enemy who is by themselves, and saving that party member means that they can help with the main fight, pushing it more in your team's favor. And to that end, if you see a retreating party member being chased, don't just let the enemy get a free kill. Punish them. Give your party member a chance to get away, and if possible, turn the tides, securing a kill on a greedy chase. Speaking of kills, a common mistake people make is focusing a single target in fights. This is usually a bad idea because normally you'll end up committing too many resources to a target that may not even be your best option. Your target in a fight should be a dynamic decision, changing constantly based on what happens in the fight. If the target you're attacking guards, then you should switch your target, but you shouldn't completely ignore the guarding target as it's possible that they may remain in the fight, in which case you can easily punish this. Or you might be able to catch them as soon as their guard ends, securing that kill. Another example of how your targets should shift is, let's say someone is a little too far out of position or low on mana. You want to target them and try to punish their greed. Or you might see a specific player as a threat, so you target them not necessarily for a kill, but to distract them from the fight, removing them as a threat to your team. You always want to be looking at the enemy and asking yourself, what is the best target right now? Situational awareness is a powerful talent to have for basically anything. Being able to analyze your surroundings and then use it to your advantage can often be the difference between you living or dying. The simplest example of what I mean when I say this is with health kits. Knowing where each map's kits are lets you know where you can go for emergency heals, but that isn't the only way you can use the kits to your advantage. Because while being able to get emergency heals is powerful, denying your opponent the ability to heal is arguably more so. And this is where situational awareness comes into play, as if you have the foresight to pop the kits closest to the enemy, then they won't have that extra heal to fall back on, which increases your team's chances of securing kills or forcing people out of the fight. Another good example of situational awareness is with positioning. Putting yourself outside the enemy's focus will force them to either split their attention or just let you do whatever you want without being punished. But it doesn't stop there, as smart positioning can easily win you games on its own. Say your team wins a fight and is about to push the crystal to the end, or time is about to run out. You could stay with your team and accomplish not much of anything, or you could move to intercept the respawning enemy to delay them from reaching the crystal, preventing a possible comeback. Now, these are both very simple examples of situational awareness, and the more advanced examples really come down to the choices you make in the moment. Things like retreating into the enemy side to heal when they're pushing into yours, or ignoring the enemy that is focusing you to help deal with the more dangerous targets to your team. And a crucial aspect of making these decisions is remaining calm. By allowing yourself to panic, you'll make the wrong choices, which will lead to you losing encounters you could very easily have won. No matter what form PvP comes in, it will always be inherently competitive, which of course will make you more prone to being tilted. And the thing is, this truth doesn't care about your skill level. Whether you're the best or the worst, you're still going to get tilted. In fact, I would argue the better you are at the game, the more susceptible you are to it. And the biggest problem with getting tilted is that it compounds on itself. The more annoyed you get, the more mistakes you start making, which then makes you get even more annoyed and repeat. Now, the only solution to getting tilted, and one that can be very difficult to do, is to take a break. Don't let yourself get into that double down mentality. Just take a step back. Go for a walk, listen to some music, do a different type of content, or maybe play a different game. I promise that if you do this, then when you come back, you'll play significantly better than when you were playing before. You'll also feel much better and enjoy yourself a lot more. And that's all the tips you need to improve and secure your Crystalline wins. Hopefully, these will help you climb through the ranks so you can get those new weapon effects. And if you found this video helpful, please consider checking out another one of my guides, which should be at the side here. And thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.